Okay, at this time, I am going to bring the Virginia Cannabis Control Authority Board of Directors meeting to order on October 1st, 2025. And it's a call to order. And first of all, on our agenda is a determination of a quorum. We do have 4 members present at this time, so we do have a quorum to conduct business. And next, we'll have our approval of our October 1st agenda. If everyone has looked at the agenda and have any questions on the agenda, first of all. With no questions, do I have a motion to approve our agenda? Do I have a second? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay, our agenda is approved. And next on the agenda is our approval of our previous meeting minutes, which was conducted on August 13th, 2025. If everyone had a chance to review the minutes of our August 13th meeting, do I have any questions reference our minutes? Okay, with no questions of our previous meetings minutes on 8/13/2025, do I have a motion to approve those minutes? Do I have a second? I got a second. And all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay, with that, our previous meetings minutes have been approved. And next, we're going to have a presentation on conflict of interest, and that's going to be with Matthew Hawkins. So, hi, Matt. How are you? I'm going to let you say your whole title. That was a whole mouthful.
Well, thank you for having me here today. My name is Matthew Hawkins, and I'm an attorney with the Virginia Conflict of Interest and Ethics Advisory Council. As Chairman mentioned, that is quite a mouthful. We more commonly refer to it as the Virginia Ethics Council, so that's kind of our shortened title. We are a legislative branch agency. We do frequently do these trainings throughout the Commonwealth, so very happy to be here with you today to give you this is actually going to be our shortened version of our Conflict of Interest Act training. The reason for that is because as board members of the Cannabis Control Authority, I understand you guys are not required to file a statement of economic interest or a financial disclosure statements. If you are required to file those forms by way of another position you might have, this training is not going to satisfy your training requirement. Those who file an SOEI or FDS form are required to take this training once every 2 years. So again, this is a shortened version. This is just the pertinent information that applies to you in your role as board members for the Cannabis Control Authority. So hopefully everyone has a copy of this handout here. I'm going to be following pretty closely along with the handout as I go. So we'll start at the top of the page number 2 here. You can see our current council membership. That is our current membership as of today. We have 9 appointed members. The Ethics Council, they usually meet about once per year for our annual meeting. A lot of you are probably wondering, what the Ethics Council does. We have a list of our statutory duties that we're required to fulfill right there. On number 2, the 2 most relevant for you all today is that we conduct trainings. As I mentioned, we do this frequently all throughout the Commonwealth for those who are required to take the training and others in this case. And we also furnish formal and informal guidance to all persons that are required to comply with the State and Local Government Conflict of Interest Act. We also furnish formal and informal guidance to lobbyists and those required to comply with the lobbying laws as well. So what is formal and informal guidance? Well, formal guidance comes in the form of what's called a formal advisory opinion. If you've ever seen an attorney general opinion, it's pretty similar to that. All of our formal advisory opinions are published online at our website. The issue with the formal advisory opinion really is the turnaround time on those. If you want to request a formal advisory opinion from our office, you must do so at least 6 weeks prior to the council's meeting, which, like I stated, they usually only meet once or twice per year. And again, the formal advisory opinion, it's completely confidential. We redact all personal identifying information from the formal advisory opinion. That information is redacted from the members themselves. So you get complete confidentiality when you request a formal advisory opinion. Um, Before the opinion is released, it must be approved by all members of the council. So again, that kind of limits the turnaround time there. If you have a request in January, you might have to wait almost an entire year before the results are actually released to you. So a bit cumbersome with the turnaround time. It is great for questions that you think might have broad applicability to a lot of other, officers or state employees. And again, as I mentioned, completely confidential. We only issue maybe about one or two of these per year, so it's a lot more rare. And by far, the most we issue a lot more informal guidance than the formal advisory opinion. So the informal guidance is you can contact the Ethics Council in whatever method you choose: email, writing, or email, phone call, even postal mail if you still use that. Our policy is to always contact you back in whatever method you contact us. The turnaround time on the informal guidance is a lot quicker. Our formal policy is to give you a response within 4 to 6 weeks. However, in practice, our turnaround time is a lot closer to about 4 to 6 days. That can depend on the time of year that you request guidance from us. If it's during our busy season, during January through March, 140 of our bosses are meeting at the Capitol. So we're a little busier during that time of year. But again, our standard turnaround time is about 4 to 6 days on the informal guidance. If you do have a specific deadline, if you have a meeting coming up and you want to know if you can participate in that meeting or vote on an issue, please let us know ahead of time. We'll always try to prioritize those requests that have a deadline and have an answer to you before your meeting or whatever. So please let us know ahead of time, and we're happy to try to get that back to you. Um, the informal guidance, the real benefit of this guidance, the informal guidance and the formal advisory opinions, under COIA, we have what's called the Safe Harbor Act. So if you have a request to us in writing and our response is in writing and you've made a good faith disclosure of all the relevant facts of your inquiry, and you rely on the guidance from the council, you will be completely immune from prosecution in any state court. So really, we're here to help you. You can never get in trouble for contacting the Ethics Council. We don't have any investigatory or enforcement power. We were really established to help people comply with the COIA laws. That is our formal and informal guidance. And again, confidentiality is extremely important to us. Any communications that you have with the Ethics Council is completely confidential. You have attorney-client privilege with our attorneys, and none of the discussions or anything written is subject to FOIA requests. So you do have complete confidentiality with us, and we're set up to help you guys, comply with the COIA laws because we'll move on to those now. It is a quite complex body of law. The COIA Act itself, the State and Local Government Conflict of Interest Act, is really organized into three different parts. The part that we're going to focus on now is prohibited conduct and personal interest. The act talks a lot about gifts, which again, as board members here, you aren't subject to those rules, so I won't cover those. And it also talks a lot about filing requirements, which again, you guys aren't required to file currently, so we don't have to go over that. So we'll move to prohibited conduct and personal interests. It's at the bottom of page 2 there. So this is what we call in our office 3103 prohibited conduct. 2.2 3103 is the statute where you can find this list of 10 things of stuff that you just can't do. So you'll see a list there of 10 things. I'm not going to read these all to you. That would be really boring. But please take some time for yourself, either later today, maybe this weekend, to go over that list. Like I said, this is 10 things that you just can't do. Most of these are kind of similar to the criminal code's bribery, extortion laws. I will highlight number 4 here. You cannot use confidential information that you have acquired by reason of your public position and use that for your own or anyone else's economic benefit. So, again, this is stuff that I think is common sense for most people, but, it's really important to read this and understand because, we are all subject to these rules here. Um, to be honest, we don't get a lot of questions in our office about this 3103 conduct. And again, that's really just because this is kind of common sense stuff, right? If somebody's offering you a paper bag filled with money in the parking lot, you probably already know that, you can't accept that. That's not something you should be doing. So please review that list on your own. It's very important. And we will turn our attention to personal interests. So while the statute itself is called the Conflict of Interest Act, the statute actually doesn't mention the term conflict of interest anywhere in the act itself, and which is kind of interesting. But the reason for that is because the act focuses a lot on what we call personal interest. So I'll read the definition to you there, page 3, letter B. A personal interest is a financial benefit or liability accruing to an officer or employee or to a member of his immediate family. So as you can tell right away from that definition, at the end there, immediate family, any interests that your immediate family have will also be imputed to you. So immediate family has a very specific definition under COIA. Immediate family is always number one, your spouse. Unless you have an official divorce decree signed by a judge, your spouse is always your immediate family. And then the second part of that definition is a true two-prong test. Your immediate family are those who reside in your household and who you claim as a dependent on your taxes. So both of those prongs must be met for them to be considered your immediate family. So as you can tell from that definition, minor children are going to usually be your immediate family. But, folks may have, their parents living at home with them or, a brother or a sibling that they're taking care of at home. They're only considered your immediate family if they both live in your household and you claim them as a dependent on your taxes. So oftentimes, a couple times a year, we'll get the question, my son moved off to college. Is he still considered my immediate family? For that, we really use like a driver's license test. Did he really, did he move away or, does he still basically live at home? That kind of test. Do you still claim them as a dependent on your taxes? So that's a really important definition, again, because any personal interest that your immediate family has also gets imputed to you. And then if you look at below that, personal interests exist due to, and then there's 6 different ways that a personal interest exists that are listed there. I'll highlight a few and a few examples for you. Number 1, a personal interest exists due to ownership in a business if the ownership interest exceeds 3% of the total equity of the business. So the real key factor there is that 3% ownership interest. So for an example, if my neighbor comes to me and he decides he wants to start a printing company and he wants me to invest in his business, but I don't know anything about printers, and frankly, I don't know anything about running a business. But he tells me, you'll just be a passive partner. If you give me $10,000, I'll give you 10% of the business. I won't have to run the books. I won't have to do anything with the business other than be a passive partner. Well, 10% is more than 3%. If I invest in that business, I'm going to have a personal interest in that business because of my ownership interest. Number 2 and 3 can kind of be smushed together a little bit. Really, the key factor for these is if you have an interest that is $5,000 or more, that interest can come through annual income, salary, other benefits, a membership at a country club, anything with a value of $5,000 or more, you'll have a personal interest. So, an example of this, let's say that my spouse works for Dell and she's paid more than $5,000 per year. Even though I don't work for Dell, I don't do anything with Dell. I have a personal interest in Dell because my spouse works for Dell and her salary is more than $5,000. Um, Another example of this that you could think of is, if you own a rental property for example, and you make more than $5,000 of income from your tenants on that property, you're going to have a personal interest in the property. So why are personal interests important? We all have personal interests. They're important when we're talking about having a personal interest in a contract or a personal interest in a transaction. So moving on to letter C here, a personal interest in a contract. You have a personal interest in a contract when you have a personal interest in a contract with a governmental agency, either by you being a party to the contract yourself or having a personal interest in a business that has a contract with that agency. So, for example, all the board members here today have a personal interest in the Cannabis Control Authority. If you have a personal interest in a business and they have a contract with your agency, you have a personal interest in that contract. As you can see below the definition there, this is for all state officers and employees. You may not have a personal interest in a contract with your agency other than your own contract of employment. So, for an example that's kind of abstract, I like to use real world examples. Um, if going back to my neighbor's printing company example, if my agency wants to have a contract with my neighbor's company, right, and I have a personal interest in that company, I'm not allowed to have any other contracts with my agency other than my own contract of employment. So that contract is not going to be allowed. Um, that being said, there are permissible, they're both permissible and impermissible types of personal interest in a contract. This is really complex, convoluted stuff to kind of talk about, but there are many exceptions to this prohibition, and we always recommend that if you have any questions about having a personal interest in a contract, you call us. We're happy to walk through that situation with you and let you know whether that contract is permissible or impermissible. And then just as another example, and to highlight one of the frequently used exceptions, going back to my spouse works for Dell. And if I walk into my agency the first day, I see that everyone else is using Dell computers. And I think to myself, uh-oh, I have a personal interest in Dell and I work for my agency and I can't have a personal interest in a contract, right? I mean, my agency has a contract with Dell and I have a personal interest in both. There is one exception. If the sole reason for your personal interest is due to salary, so that would be my wife's salary, and my wife did not have any authority to negotiate the contract on behalf of Dell, and I didn't have any authority to negotiate the contract on behalf of my agency, among a few other hurdles, that would be an example of an exception. So, I wouldn't have to quit my job the first day just because they're, using Dell computers at my agency. So again, that's just highlighting there are many exceptions to having a personal interest in a contract. If you have a question about this, please contact us. And we will also talk about personal interest in a transaction. So while there's many exceptions to having a personal interest in a contract, there are far fewer exceptions to having a personal interest in a transaction. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of read this definition. Stick with me. It's going to be very confusing, but I'll highlight a few examples to hopefully help you understand, how this works in practice. So, a personal interest in a transaction means you have a personal interest in any matter considered by your agency when official action is taken or contemplated. And a transaction, when we're talking about a transaction, we're talking about all steps of the transaction. That includes any discussion about the transaction, any debate, any discussion in a meeting, and the actual vote itself. Um, so again, it's when any official action is taken or even contemplated. The personal interest exists when you, or again, a member of your immediate family, has a personal interest in property or a business, or represents or provides services to any individual or business, and the property, business, or represented or served individual or business is either the subject of the transaction or the property business represented or served individual or business may realize a reasonably foreseeable direct or indirect benefit or detriment as a result of the action of the transaction. So again, that's a very abstract definition there. If we go back to my neighbor's printing company example, right? So I work for my agency, and they're going to consider getting a new contract to upgrade their computer equipment, and they're considering between using Apple products or Dell products. Um, Again, I have a personal interest in Dell through my wife's employment, and I would not be able to participate in that transaction, right? Because I clearly have a personal interest in Dell. If Dell gets the contract with my agency, I'm clearly Dell and myself and my spouse are going to realize a reasonably foreseeable direct benefit. So I would not be able to participate in that transaction at all. I would not be able to discuss it. I would also need to publicly disqualify myself in the minutes of the meeting, and I would not be able to participate at any step of the process. So that, again, includes any discussion, debate, participation in the meeting. So that is an example of having an impermissible personal interest in a transaction. An example of having that was an example of having a direct benefit, right? I think we can all see that if Dell gets the contract with my agency, I'm realizing a benefit. Dell is realizing a benefit there. An indirect benefit, we had a situation in our office where a gentleman on an EDA, they were considering hiring general contractors for a construction project. And they were deciding between contractor A and contractor B. And the gentleman calls our office, and he was quite worried that he may have a personal interest in a transaction. My boss spoke with him, and he said, "Well, do you have a personal interest in contractor A?" No. Okay. Do you have a personal interest in contractor B? No. Um, okay, so he's asking what's the issue here, and he says, well, my wife's company, she owns an arc welding company, or she has an interest in this arc welding company, and they've done 90% of all the arc welding work on the East Coast for contractor B. Okay, so now we can kind of see there, he was not able to participate in that transaction, right? Because if he votes for contractor B and contractor B is awarded the contract, then, his wife's company is going to realize an indirect benefit there because, they've done 90% of the subcontractor work for that company. So that's an example of where you may have an indirect benefit. Another tricky one with having a personal interest in a transaction, this can also apply if you provide services to a business or a nonprofit. So, some of you may be on other boards or maybe, provide services to a nonprofit. Um, if that's the case and the nonprofit is the subject of the transaction, or again, may realize a reasonably foreseeable direct benefit, you may not be able to participate. So even though you don't have a financial interest necessarily, you represent or provide services to that entity, and you would not be able to participate in the transaction. Um, at the bottom there, so if the transaction applies solely um, to the entity in which you have a personal interest, or if you have a personal interest in the transaction and there's no other way to participate, as I mentioned, you must publicly disqualify yourself. So that would be in the minutes of the meeting. You would make a public disclosure that you have a personal interest and you cannot participate. If you have a personal interest, but you can still participate. So I'll highlight one exception here. As I mentioned, there are a few exceptions, but there's far fewer than having a personal interest in a contract. But one common exception is what we call the B1 exception. That's found in 2.23112B1. And this exception says if you are a group of three or more, the members of which are impacted by a transaction, then you may participate in the transaction. However, you still have to make a public disclosure that you do have a personal interest, but you are able to participate. So an example of that, if I own a vape shop, for example, and I'm on the board of the Cannabis Control Authority, and we're considering a recommendation to ban all CBD vapes in the Commonwealth, right? Um, I'm clearly going to be impacted by that transaction. I own a vape shop. That's a popular product that I sell. If we vote to outlaw all these products, that'll impact my business. However, the three or more exception, there are three or more other businesses that will equally be impacted by this transaction. As long as I can be fair and objective in voting on the issue, then I could still participate as long as I make the public disclosure. So again, this is really tricky in practice to apply. It's very complicated. We highly recommend if you have a question about having a personal interest in a contract or a transaction that you contact us. We're happy to walk through that situation with you and determine whether it's permissible or impermissible. So that is my training for today. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take some questions, but thank you so much for having us. Like I said, we're always happy to do these presentations. So it's great to be with you here today.
Okay, any questions from the board for Matthew?
Oh, I did forget to mention the last page of the handout there is all our contact information. So if you do have any questions or have a specific situation you want to talk about, please feel free to reach out.
And such great examples and great explanations. Thank you, Matthew, for being
Thank
here
you.
with us
Thank you
today.
for having us.
Matthew, if I may, if you could explain to the board, just to make sure that we all understand, a transaction isn't necessarily a contract. It could also mean a licensing decision or a disciplinary decision as well. Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean,
Okay.
again, the definition is very broad. It's any action that your agency uh, takes or even contemplates taking. So if you have a personal interest in, that business or entity that's being talked about, that you cannot participate in any stage of the transaction, which includes even just talking about it to other board members.
Great. Thanks again, Matthew.
Yep. Thank you.
Take care. And next, we'll have a presentation with Dr. Elena Holt from the research faculty of VCU, and it's monitoring the market, preliminary results from surveillance, shopping, and school system confiscated vapes. Welcome, Dr. Holt.
Thank you for having me today. So we'll just get started. I work in a research lab at Virginia Commonwealth University. We have a project where we go around the state of Virginia and we do surveillance shopping just to see what is in the market. So we have divided the state into the 5 planning health regions to kind of anonymize some of our results when we talk about them. So to date, we have gotten products from the southwest region of Virginia. That includes products from 4 clubs, 1 vape shop, 1 dispensary, and 1 bakery. And then we've started to secret shop the northwest region, which so far to date, we've purchased from 2 dispensaries. So just to give you some background on the places that we have gotten products from, we have these social clubs, and you'll see here that 2 of them are what they self-describe as a membership club. So you have to purchase a membership in order to be able to go in and receive products from them. One of them further defines themselves as an adult use sharing collective. The other 2 social clubs that we have are for the general public. So one of them actually lists themselves as an arcade and a lounge. So that was new and fun. I tried to look up any websites to see if they had further information, social media, things like that. So some of these shops you'll see have daily giveaways for members or for the public, just depending on the different platform that you're looking at. So looking at the products that we're getting from some of these places, this is one of the public clubs that we receive products from. They had anywhere from gummies to crumble flour products. There was this purple passion soda, as well as what was described as a medicated syrup. A couple things I just wanted to point out from these samples was that the THC Tech medicated syrup, when I tried to find it online, there was nothing available. I couldn't find it listed. I couldn't find a manufacturer. This Keef soda product is manufactured in Boulder, Colorado, so it's coming across state lines there. That drink also is described as containing 100 milligrams of THC. When I think of a THC beverage, I'm usually thinking 5 to 10 milligrams. So that's like 10 times what I would expect. You can see the can is a solid silver. On the back, they have it kind of broken down into 10 segments that are supposed to help the consumer pour out a dose, but it is meaningless because the bottle isn't clear, so you can't really see anything. So fun facts. Here are some products from one of the membership stores. Right off the bat, when I opened up that brownie product and tried to sample it, something popped out. I'm not sure if it was hair. I'm not sure if it was a fiber, but to me, that's very concerning for a consumer to see that, and frankly, disgusting. This store also had a couple types of flower products. They sold what are referred to as moon rocks. They had a pre-roll, and then we also received this whole melt vape product, which is another interstate product from Los Angeles, California. One thing to note, when you looked at all four sides of that whole melt vape cartridge packaging, there was not a single mention of any sort of concentration. The only thing that you know is that you're buying 2 grams of something. So this store actually did list, they had a website where you could go and find what products you could buy. So everything I've mentioned, as well as this new product that I'm starting to see more and more of called snowballs, as well as some other edible products. Back to another public club. So this was that arcade store. We have Pac-Man, which is a vape product. There's a Kush packaging, which contained flower product and some sort of, I'm guessing it was a freebie. I didn't make the purchase, so I'm not sure, but it seemed like a freebie was thrown in. We had 2 flower products in the bottom packages there, and then a pre-roll. So a couple things to note from this sample set. The vape cartridge, again, I tried to do some online research for it. I could not find a clear parent company, so we don't know who manufactured it, where it comes from. It seemed like most people assumed it's coming from overseas, which we know that there's a lot of quality assurance concerns just right there. Also, not a single product from this particular purchase had any labeled ingredients on it or any concentrations on the packaging, so that's concerning. You can also see that there's several packages that had handwritten elements to it. So, you know, depending on who's doing the writing, it could change day to day. And we do what's called microbiologicals analysis. This is where we take some of the product and we plate it to see what kind of microbes are present in the sample. So for this one, that top Kush flower, as well as the freebie that was inside of it, showed growth for very clearly mold for both of those products. And then that freebie also showed growth for coliform, which is indicative of fecal matter contamination. So lovely. And then these are the products from that final membership store. You can see here, not a single product, again, had any labeled ingredients or concentrations. Even though this was a private store, they did have a website where they listed all of the products available, but they were pretty generically labeled as just tier 1 through tier 3. They also had some concentrates and some disposables. Again, the flower products that we tested showed growth for mold. Pretty clearly that top right one was just overloaded. So I'm not going to go through each of these, but we do quantitative analysis on the cannabinoids in the products. What I'm trying to highlight here is that of all 25, 12 products did not have any label on them. 2 of the 25 were within 20% of their label. 4 were within 50% of their label. And 6 products were more than 50% off of their labeled concentration. So we're having some issues with quality assurance there. We did some secret shopping in one vape shop. Pretty typical, all kinds of products available, as you can see. So we got 2 different vapes. Here's the first one. It, again, is a product of California. At the time of purchase, it was already a year past its expiration date, which I'm not sure what the expiration date really means on a vape, but they're still selling it, so that's a problem. You'll also notice on most vape products these days, they have the standard language of this is hemp derived. It contains less than 0.3% THC. When we did our quantitation of it, we found that it contained almost 4% THC, Delta 9 THC, and 30% Delta 8 THC. And we also identified several of these semi-synthetic cannabinoids. This is the second vape product that was purchased at that store. I could not find any information about who the manufacturer was, and it did not have any information on the label as to what it contained or its concentrations. So again, the consumer does not know what they are ingesting. Here we have a couple stores that self-identified as a dispensary or a head shop. So the first one at the top right was a very fancy store that I got to go into and purchase from. They call themselves a boutique dispensary. They are located on the Charlottesville downtown mall, very nice location. Down below that, we have just your pretty typical dispensary that you can walk into. They had a couple chairs where you can kind of sit and relax and some products on the walls there. And then the final one on your left was another shop that I got to go into. On the website, they always talk about how they're very health conscious. They care about safety. Everything will have a certificate of analysis. So hold on to that thought. All right, so this was the one of the first dispensaries. We got two products from it. One was this pre-roll, and one was a pretty generic vape, disposable vape device. Again, you'll notice a trend here. I could not find the manufacturer on that vape device, an online vendor, and it was very vague with what was in the actual product. This was from the very nice Charlottesville store. So it was a pretty big selection. I ended up purchasing what was labeled as THCA diamonds that were supposed to be almost 96% pure THCA. There was this THCA flower product, as well as a THCA vape product. So again, on their website, you can see all kinds of products that they offer. I just wanted to highlight a couple that I feel particularly strong about. There was this Azura chocolate bar. There's no information about that brand online. So you really don't have a lot of information about where it's coming from and what it contains. This store sells Benoid products, which I personally feel very strongly about. Our research lab has spent multiple years purchasing from that company and looking at their quality assurance, and it's always blows my mind what they're selling and getting away with. And then they do sell a couple of products from out-of-state wholesalers. This is that final dispensary shop, the one that said, we care about safety, and you can see a certificate of analysis for your product. But when I tried to pull up these three products that were purchased, not a single one was available on the website. Sometimes you would find something for a similar product, but not that exact product. So it's kind of like they were just putting up a certificate of analysis and hoping people weren't really paying attention. So this store also sells a variety of products, once again, including those Benoid vape cartridges that I feel very strongly about. Here you'll see when we did the quantitation, none of the products purchased were within 20% of their label. None of them were within 50% of their label, and 4 of them were more than 50% off of their label. A couple of those are still awaiting results. When we ran them, things looked a little funny, a little concentrated, so we're going back and reanalyzing before we make any statement on what they contain. Here we have a bakery that's in Southwest Virginia. It's gotten actually quite a bit of media attention since it opened, particularly when it opened its drive-through window, which you can not even have to get out of your car and get your products now. They have also partnered with DoorDash to have their products delivered. So lots of attention on media for all of that. Here you can see the variety of products that we received from them. So we got anything from gummies to a chocolate truffle. There was peanut butter fudge, a chocolate chip cookie that had like this thick crumbly icing in the center of it. There was a Lucky Charms treat, a Rice Krispie treat, and then this s'more brownie, and a really nice smelling vanilla coffee. Just about every single one of those products tested positive for aerobic bacteria. And the Rice Krispie treat, again, tested positive for coliform, which indicates fecal contamination. So things that we love to think about when we're eating our food. Here are the results of quantitation. So this company was good about listing, or at least labeling, the THC content and the CBD content. So you'll see that for 2 of the products, they were within 20% of the labeled THC. 2 were within 50% of the THC, and 4 were more than 50% off the labeled THC content. Similar trends with CBD, where we had a kind of a smattering between the 3 categorizations that I broke it down into. I did also want to highlight that for these edibles, the testing and analysis is a little bit more complicated. Let me go back so you can see. The peanut butter fudge was a very homogeneous sample. The cannabinoid truffle, we tested the chocolate shell as well as the truffle interior, and we determined that the truffle was where the cannabinoids were. Same thing for the cookie. The cannabinoids were in the icing. For the bottom 3, the cannabinoids were found in the glaze component. So in order to do analysis, you have to very carefully scrape that glaze and try and not get any of like the brownie product. But even if you do that and you determine the cannabinoid content in the glaze, we still don't know how they're manufacturing these. Is it very consistent in them dispensing exactly whatever unit of glaze onto each cookie? And when you look at the brownie, you'll see it's not a consistent glaze overall. There were definitely pockets of where it was thicker, which means if somebody took a bite out of that section, they're going to get more than if they took a bite out of the section that had almost no glaze on it. So just a caveat to think about when talking about testing those edibles. And then I'm going to wrap up by talking about another project that we have our hands on for the lab. We receive vaping products that have been confiscated out of Virginia school systems. It started in 2019, a very local effort when some teachers thought that students were using cocaine. And we said, just go ahead and send them to us and we'll test them. And we got a great response. And then we've started expanding our reach every year since then. It has really allowed us to monitor what's going on in the vaping market, as well as kind of what's going on with student populations in terms of what they're able to get access to and are using. So don't worry about everything on this figure here. What I want to draw your attention to is there was a very clear shift between our spring 2020 collection and our fall 2023 collection, where we really didn't see any cannabinoid containing vapes pre 2020. And then all of a sudden, following 2023, we start seeing this increase in the number of cannabinoid vapes that are being turned into us. We also started seeing the vaping products reaching our elementary school aged population. So in fall of 2023, we received 3 products from an elementary school aged child. One of those 3 products was a cannabinoid based product. So bringing it up to what we are seeing in this most recent academic year. First off, on the left there, you'll see some of the vaping devices that were more prevalent. These are the cannabinoid-based ones. You'll notice that whole melt there, which is one of the ones that we purchased in our secret shop. We're also seeing what is being referred to as a dual chamber device. So this is a new iteration of vapes being sold today. They have 2 chambers and they allow the user to switch back and forth between the 2 chambers. So to date, we've received almost 1,300 submissions. I do want to put out the disclaimer that that's really not an accurate representation of what is in our school marketplace. One, we're only reaching maybe 5% of all of the schools in Virginia. And second, we know from personal correspondence that each school system has a unique policy on what they do with the vapes. There's a lot that have reached out and said, if we think it's nicotine, we'll turn it over to you. If we think it's a cannabinoid-based vape, we're going to give it over to the law enforcement. So we don't get those. So it kind of skews our data set a little bit. So just keep that in mind. Still, we found that regardless of the type of vape, most students report either getting it from a friend or purchasing it themselves, which is a problem because every student here should be under 21 and should not have access to these. Of those almost 1,300 submissions, about 14% of them contain cannabinoids, which was pretty consistent with the previous collection cycle. When we looked at the overall cannabinoid concentration in these vape products, they ranged anywhere from 28 to 90% total cannabinoids, so very concentrated. And we still continue to identify all kinds of semi-synthetics, such as the delta-8 THC, THCPs, hexahydrocannabinols, things of that nature. We also look at the microbiologicals in vapes. What we've seen is we're finding microbiological growth in both the liquid component as well as the aerosol that gets generated from those vapes. And why we care about if it's in the aerosol or not is if we can aerosolize a product and then demonstrate that there's growth, that means that that microbe remained viable through the heating process and can now be inhaled by the user, which can cause all kinds of side effects and illnesses. And then I'm going to just end on what we're seeing with these dual chamber devices. Again, these are pretty new to the market. We've seen some where they list that they are a dual nicotine, so they might just have different flavors. We've seen ones such as these two, which are labeled as dual cannabinoid. I did want to highlight that these products, again, just like most vapes, will say they contain less than 0.3% delta THC, they are hemp derived, etc. Both of them did contain more than 0.3%. And then we also have these products that are calling themselves spliffs, which just kind of like a cigarette, but in vape form. One chamber is a nicotine component and one is a cannabinoid. So one thing to note when we did testing on these products, the electric spliff there had cannabinoids in both chambers. So we're not sure if it was contamination over into nicotine or just honestly really bad quality assurance measures. So that kind of wraps up what we're seeing from our school system. So question.
Any questions from the board for Dr. Holtz? I don't know where to start. Be honest with you, for what I just saw is very interesting and but very concerning of what's out there. And I just have to I've heard in the news here a lot of our partners in law enforcement have been very busy in the vape shops in Henrico and Richmond. I just saw posted online 72 pounds of illegal substances, 8 arrested, and don't know what the illegal substances were. They didn't specify, but 72 pounds and stuff. And it's so Richmond and Henrico has been very busy, and that's just in Central Virginia. I know what's happening in every neck of the woods in our Commonwealth.
Definitely, yes. Yeah.
But again, is any questions for Dr. Holt? Dr. Holt, thank you for being with
No,
us
thank you
today.
so much for having me when I talk about this.
Okay.
All right.
It is. Okay. Let me get my. Next on our agenda, we'll have our budget and finance update.
This should be really quick. Um, so our report this board meeting is for the period ending August 31st, 2025. Obviously, September just closed yesterday and the official accounting month has not closed. So we're presenting August 31st. That puts us about 83% remaining on the year. When you look at our percent remaining in funds, we are very close to that. So general fund, we have roughly 80% remaining, and non-general fund, almost 84%. It'll never be perfect, obviously, because sometimes you have larger expenses in one part of the year than the other. I did want to point out just a couple of things. Obviously our largest budget is our personal services. And then the other large ones that you see end up being right now a lot of our IT services for the systems that have been implemented. And so those are some of the larger expenditures you see there. Otherwise, I think we're fine. In all of our categories, we're doing pretty well. And if anything changes, we'll come back to the board and ask for a modification, but I'm comfortable with where we are so far. I'll take any questions if there are.
Any questions for Jamie, reference of budget?
That would be things like rent, building rent, or anything else like a copier lease or something like that, where it's a routine certain period payment.
Okay. Any other questions? Great. Thanks, Jamie, for that update.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, next on our agenda, I will open up our public comment period. And I'll just read a short statement before this. The CCA board and staff value public input. People who would like to speak before the board must submit their intentions to do so by a form available on the CCA website. The form must be submitted no more than 24 hours before the scheduled board meeting. The form also allows the submission of written comments to the board. The board will now turn to the requests that we've received. And remember that we have 3 minutes for each public comment. And I believe do I have in person today? Do I have Kenneth Hanold with us? Or how about Debbie Jennings? Hi, Debbie, come on up. Yes, please. Thank you.
So I wanted to let you know who I am and what we're doing with Virginia. My name's Debbie Jennings. I work for Chesapeake Region Safety Council. We're located in Baltimore. We're a 501c3 nonprofit that is also a chapter of National Safety Council. We're a OSHA Training Institute and Ed Center certifying instructors for workplaces. And we also have affiliations with a few higher education organizations. What I wanted to let you know about is a program that we started 6 years ago. It's an impairment education and cannabis use workshop program. I've done about 45 of these in Maryland, one in Virginia. The one that I did here in Virginia was the end of June. And the intent is to educate employers and eventually here, we are already doing it in Maryland, law enforcement or other organizations about the difference between signs of use and what impairment looks like. And it's becoming more and more relevant, especially as legalization takes place and employers are coming up with their workplace policies as to use and testing. During these programs, which are absolutely free, we also bring in technology partners. Some of them have the ability to test only for presence of cannabis or other impairing factors, and others are moving toward being able to actually determine impairment. So we bring them in for free. The consumers have the ability to use their products that they brought in and then have conversations with those technology partners as to what they found. And it usually takes about 2 hours to move through the entire process. Law enforcement will be taking their own classes and then actually do the field sobriety tests with the consumers after the end of their training. And then we all come back together and discuss what was seen with the workplace employers shadowing the entire process and learning from the law enforcement and having really interesting, engaging conversations with the consumers. So we have had that one in June. We will move closer to the model that we have in Maryland, which is pretty extensive, bringing in all of those other partners. And we have already had interest from some Virginia organizations about bringing it here more frequently. And then I have actually three more in Maryland and Baltimore in the next few months. And I have Virginia law enforcement, prosecutor, judges, and 2 representatives from the Virginia Crime Commission coming up to those upcoming events. So again, everything's free. You're more than welcome to come. I have my business cards. You can take them, look us up on the website if you want, call me if you have questions, and share it with anybody else you think might be interested. And that's it.
Thank you, Debbie, for being with us today. Appreciate the information. Usually we don't ask questions in, this is just a public comment period.
Do you want me to stay after?
we'll just, we just, at this point, we just have to take it as a public comment. Appreciate it, Debbie. Okay, and that's it for who's in person. And do we should show maybe 3 people online? We have 2 online. Okay, and who's up first there, Jared? Yeah, I don't wanna butcher his last name there. I might do Human S. And if you're with us, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Hi, can you all hear me? Hello?
Human, are you with us?
I should be. Can you hear me?
Can you tell Mr.
Hello?
We're having an audio issue in the room.
Hi, can you hear me?
Okay, Human, at this point, we're having problems with our audio. You see that you have your hand raised, but we're having problems with our audio at this time.
So what am I supposed to do? Hello, hello.
Human,
We
we
just
can hear
had
you.
you. Are you with us?
Yes, hi. Can you hear me okay?
Hold on. You go ahead.
All right, very good. Hi, and good afternoon, and thanks for the opportunity to speak. Here today, my name is Dr. Human Sabarinia, and I run a small independent practice that certifies patients for medical cannabis in Virginia. I want to raise concerns about the upcoming transition to the new certification portal in November. The first concern is that the Social Security requirement on the new form. This is a major barrier for patients. Many are already hesitant to pursue medical cannabis because of stigma and uncertainty. Asking for a Social Security number only adds to their reluctance and may deter them from seeking care altogether. I still don't think I understand what the utility or purpose is of collecting Social Security numbers in the portal. The second issue is attestations. The current process requires multiple checkboxes for clinicians to confirm information that is already covered in our clinical documentation and licensure. To put that into perspective, when I prescribe opioids, I do not have to go through this level of attestations. When I order advanced imaging like an MRI or CT scan, I document medical necessity, but I'm not asked to click through multiple redundant affirmations. And honestly, even certifying a patient for hospice care, end of life care, which obviously carries profound implications, requires far less administrative attestations than what this portal now asks of us. There's no other area of medicine that I can think of that requires this level of duplicative checkboxing. It adds administrative weight without adding real safeguards. My one solution could be consolidating this into a single statement that's mapped to the regulation while allowing details to remain in the clinical note. That would reduce clicks and burden while ensuring compliance. I also want to emphasize the disproportionate impact these requirements have on small practices like mine. Large corporations that work and operate in Virginia may have the infrastructure built around monetizing certifications. Independent practices like mine do not. We don't have teams of staff to prepare portal entries ahead of time, so every extra requirement pulls directly from physician and patient care time. Streamlining the process would help preserve patient access while still meeting the regulatory intent. I respectfully urge the board to revisit these two areas, again, the Social Security numbers and the attestations, to ensure the portal protects patients and maintains compliance without creating unnecessary barriers. And thank you for your time and for your work to ensure safe and equitable access to medical cannabis across Virginia. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor, for your public comment and your concerns.
Thanks.
Take care. And what's next? Is Sarah Payne? Sarah Payne, are you with us?
Hi, I'm here.
Okay, Sarah, you can begin. Welcome, and you have 3 minutes.
Great, thank you very much. I just wanted to thank Dr. Holt for her presentation. It's certainly enlightening information and I think very important to take into consideration moving forward. I just wanted to finish off the meeting here with a just a reminder. I think Dr. Holt made it pretty clear, but we're not talking about regulated medical products that are ending up in the wrong hands or that are being sold in unlicensed venues, and just be clear that the regulated industry does work in that respect for public health and safety reasons. So thank you again.
Okay, thank you, Sarah, for your public comment today. Take care.
Thank you.
Oh, go ahead, Jamie.
Wanted to follow up on the previous public comment regarding the social security number requirement, and let everyone know that is one modification we identified for the portal, and requested a change to. It is in progress, and it'll no longer, once the change is made, it'll no longer require the social security number. It will allow the entry of a variety of options for a unique identifier.
Jamie, for that explanation. Okay, at this time, that's it. We'll close the public comment period. And next is my time that I have to read to put the board into closed session. And after I read this, you all are, we will have to leave, but you're all welcome to come back when we reconvene. But at this time, I will convene a closed meeting of the Cannabis Control Authority Board. And I move that the Virginia Cannabis Control Authority convene a closed meeting under the Virginia Freedom of Information Act to discuss a matter lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under the following exemption: consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members and consultants pertaining to actual or probable litigation, which is found in Virginia Code 2.2-3711, subsection A7. The following non-members will be in attendance for this closed meeting to reasonably aid in the consideration of the topic, which will be our legal counsel, Jim Flaherty, Jamie Patton, and Sean Casey. So at this time, do I have a motion to put us into closed session? Do I have a second? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? At this time, the board is in closed session. Thank you all for being here. At this time, I will read to take us out of closed session. Whereas the Virginia Cannabis Control Authority has convened a closed meeting on the date pursuant to affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Freedom of Information Act. And whereas 2.2-3712D of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by this board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the CCA hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements by Virginia laws were discussed in the closed meeting to which this certification resolution applies. And two, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the CCA. Do I have a motion to take us out of a closed meeting? Do I have a second? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay, with that being said, we are out of closed meeting and now we are open into the public meeting once again. And being in the public meeting, Jamie, did we discuss all matters that needs to be discussed today? Okay, with that being said there, with no further business conducting, the CCA Board Directors meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.